every single one of you has come for a reason, which is the right reason for the right coming. So anyway, I'm happy to be here. I'm thrilled. It's wonderful to be in a group like this. We don't often get to do this. We were talking, I and Stephen and Dan, about how half the time we have to go through our lives without ever revealing who we are. We have to pretend to be, we are like them. We are like the others, you know, and we are just in disguise. But isn't it wonderful to be with others when you can just go ahead and let it all hang out and be who you are? So anyway, I'm grateful to be here.
So as we begin and as others filter in, I can kind of do some of the housekeeping. If you don't already know, the bathroom is right here. There's a nice sign there, bathroom. And books and CDs that we both have to offer are on the table. You can have any of them, any of the books for $10 a piece and any of the CDs for $5. And there are many ways you can contribute: cash, check, Venmo, credit card. So we've made it really easy if you feel inspired that you want any of those things. Dorothy has some wonderful YouTube videos with Andrew Harvey. So if you want to Google her name first, Dorothy Walters and Andrew Harvey, Google it in that order, then come in. Google it in that order and they will pop up. If you put Andrew Harvey's name first, you will get the myriad of videos that he has, and hers are embedded deep in his stream. So put in her name first. And then you'll see other information of wonderful gatherings and things that I get the honor of facilitating. So make sure you stop there and connect with us and connect with each other. Connect with each other. When we look with the beloved's eyes, we see the beloved's face. And I'd like to invite you to let yourself gaze around the room, looking with the beloved's eyes, so that you can have the sweetness of enjoying the beloved's face. Words. We know that words fall short, and yet words can be such a portal and a catalyst for an ever-deepening experience of spirit at our center. And so I would invite you to allow words to be a very lightly held invitation and dance for yourself, knowing that you have your words that point to your experience, and that experience itself is truly wordless, and we'll be sharing words, and our words are going to be coming from our enculturation, from our effort and excitement and celebration of spilling into an expression of the experience of the beloved. And yet we both fully know that those words fall quite short. So we have choices with words. We can let them pull us back and hold us in and contract us, or we can allow the words themselves to be the fire that ignites our soul to open up in ways that take us into new experience. And that's the hope that we have, that Dorothy and I have. We've wanted to do this for a number of years, where we have the simplicity of simply sharing the experience, some of the experience, right? A moment in time. We'll both be sharing 2 moments in time that were really quite timeless. not the analysis of it, not the reflection of it, not the insight coming from it, not any of the observation of it as much as we're capable as weak human beings, but rather just the raw experience itself. To invite in the opportunity for each of you to not only get to relish all the experiences that you have had of the ineffable, whether it's source, whether it's life force, whether it's God, whether it's spirit, whether it's beloved, to touch in and have that elixir and that intoxication, but simultaneously to provide the opportunity for you to share that here with some that you know and some that you don't know. And our gathering is large enough that we'll probably break into smaller groups so that everyone has a chance to share only if they want. Because I know that when I experience the beloved in ever new ways, I sometimes lose my words and am more comfortable not sharing verbally, and that's fully acceptable as well. So you follow what moves within you, and know that whether you share words or do not share words, you're sharing in the embodiment of presence here together. And so we can bow before the burning bush as it takes place within each one of us. The flow of our event today is very simple. We're going to do an opening, Marilyn with gong, Marcy with some tones, me with a tone and a poem, and Dorothy with a poem. And that'll set the space. And then Dorothy's going to share an experience, and I'll share one, and Dorothy will share, and I will share, and then we will open it up to a larger gathering of all of us to share. How does that sound and feel? Yeah. Okay. Does everybody feel ready to begin? If you want to try to hold on to your seats, some of you have handles that you can hold on to for the ecstatic experience. Others, sorry, you're very calm. All right. Dorothy, are you ready to begin?
We're trying to find our first poem, so.
For during the opening? Okay.
So she'll go last.
I think she's first, don't you first?
You're after Marcy, if that works for you.
Yeah.
Okay. And we begin. Sanctus es vivificando forma Sanctus es unguendo periculos ei fractos Sanctus es tegendo
We're going to all talk later about our own mystical experiences. And basically, I think there are two ways that you can really know that you're a mystic, and you know what they are. And one is the slow way, where you gradually change and transform and come into presence. And there's another way, which is the lightning flash, it's sometimes called, or the Big Bang. And it so happened that that's the way that it happened for me. And we'll talk about that later. But I want to read just one poem at this time. And this poem, interestingly enough, was written before I had major awakening. But I was sort of on the way, kind of pointed in that direction. So this is a poem that was written about 2 months before the Big Bang occurred for me. And I think it's kind of interesting for that reason. And it starts with a quote from Rumi. Those drowned in God wish to be more drowned. You know what that means. So this is a poem based upon that notion. Everything in, nothing held back. Not the bewildered face in the mirror, the memory of the first time, the quarrel and reconciliation. This wind will sweep you from yourself. The way clouds absorb an ocean. The way fire seeks out the marrow of flame. When it is over, you will be less than a bit of twisted weed, smaller than a splinter of sea blackened wind. You will not miss your lost possessions, not even remember them again. When someone shows you your lost items, your familiar appendages and agendas, even your flashing ornaments, you will look puzzled and ask, what are those? Their functions or relevance I have drunk from a deep well. What are these sips you offer just for the taste? I am looking for a world sky deep in water.
Mm-hmm. tulip. We suck the moment, tender, raw, free. A word plunges me into you. A phrase opens the dark door of discovery. And your light shows up softly, striding forward to take me. My shoes and dress fall off as my lips reach yours. Without touching you, I touch you, quivering. Without hearing your voice, I vibrate in its sound. Without and within, I go, twisting and undulating in the rhythm of your love.
Mystics. That's what we are. We're mystics. And you tell a lot of people that, they think you've gone nuts for sure. What is a mystic? A mystic is someone who loves God and finds ways. And thank you, Kimberly. That's a beautiful, beautiful poem. So this is how I came to know that I was a mystic. My life, the year was 1981, which is now a long time ago. But at that day, it wasn't a long time ago. It was the now, it was the immediate, it was what is. My life was in turmoil, and that's the way it often starts. With some sort of a blow, some sort of a loss, some sort of a sorrow, and it can be anything. It can be a personal relation, it can be a physical failing, it can be some trauma in your life. But for me, it was a love trauma, because I'd been in a relationship for 10 years and thought it was for life, and suddenly found out it wasn't going to be for life. It was going to be for another week. And that was very disturbing to me. So I was in a state of deep despair, because it's like, and I imagine all of us have been there one time or another, in one way or another. And it's like the floor just goes out from your feet. You don't know where you are. You're falling through outer space. So I was a mess. I was wrecked, truly. So then this is what happened. One day during that time, I woke up in a state of being that I'd never known or didn't even have a word for. I didn't know what to call it, but it was very different. But every cell and every pore of my body was suddenly illumined, and I felt like, I don't know what I felt like, I couldn't describe it. I didn't have a word for it. I didn't know what was going on, but it was wonderful. It was wonderful. And finally, I found one person I could talk to. I didn't have anybody. I didn't have any teacher. I didn't have any guru. I had a couple of books. I read Gopi Krishna, I knew his book, and a couple of others, but that was about it. There was almost nothing. It wasn't like it is today, when there's a Kundalini yoga studio on every corner, and Kundalini itself has become a buzzword. Most people, including me, had never really heard of this. Most of us didn't. I had no idea what it was. But anyway, it happened. And I knew one person who I could talk to. She was a psychotherapist. She was a follower of the person then called Sri Bhagwan Rajneesh. Perhaps you've heard him, then he became Osho. But she was a follower of that teacher. And that teacher opened his students to ecstasy. So when I told her my story, she said, "You have experienced ecstasy." I said, "Oh, finally, I have a word for it." But I didn't know what else to call it. So I woke up that day and found myself in ecstasy, which is ineffable, which is the most valuable word there is, which means cannot be described in words. So if you've been there, you know what I'm talking about. You can't describe it. I can't give it to other people, but it does happen. And probably some of you have experienced that. Anyway, I was in ecstasy, and that ecstasy lasted all that day, and all the next day, and all the next day, and all the next day. And it went on and on and on, and it lasted, believe it or not, for years, but not with the intensity of the beginning. I said that in the beginning, it was like having a big brass band march through your living room. It was fierce. And I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't have anybody except that one woman that I could even talk to about it. So I didn't tell anybody for 15 years. I spent 15 years of silence. And I was working, I was teaching, I was still teaching, I was trying to keep my mind on the subject. It wasn't easy, but I did manage to continue for 15 years teaching. But as time went on, it did diminish. At first it was so intense, I had no idea what to do with it. Finally, I just lay on the floor and I put out my arms and I said, "Here I am, God, take me." And he did, and she did, whoever. But, so that was the beginning. And that went on for 15 years. And then it got quieter and quieter for me. And finally, after so many, many years, it was no longer like a big brass band marching through the living room. It was more like listening to a little flute play in the distance, but it was ecstasy. It was ecstatic, it was sweet, nonetheless, even though it was softer and gentler. And then finally, after more years, it sort of went away. And I'll confess, I don't have those experiences now. But it's just as well. I'm glad that I had them when I was younger. I don't think I was tough enough to have them later on in my life. So anyway, it was the experience that we call it awakening, and certainly it was awakening for me. I'd like to read just one poem about that, Seekers. This is called Seekers, and this is dedicated to all of us. Each of us is seeking for a wise man or woman to lead us, to present us a scroll heavy with answers. Some of us have climbed the mountain, tracked the glacier's crust, lain down for years in snow for days, burning away to essence, preparing. Others have clung to the underside of overhanging rock until their fingers turned to stone, until they were what? What's that word? I can't read my writing. They were riveted. Like lead to the thin edge of certainty. And others wander, drifting like mist through the valleys. What is it that we are seeking? What will we do if we are brushed by this lion's mane? So that's the question. What will we do if we are brushed by this lion's mane? Well, I was more than brushed by the lion's mane. I was more or less devoured by the lion suddenly and left to deal with it with no teacher except the one we all carry with us at all times. And that's the teacher inside. And I'm convinced there were guides or a guide or something leading me through this very dramatic, very intense, very astonishing experience. But I did not have an external teacher. I never had an external teacher. I always listened carefully to the teacher, whoever the teacher was. And I learned a lot from many teachers, but I never had a teacher. I was not a follower. I listened to the teacher within, and I think that is the primary teacher for me. I don't have a creed, I don't have a church, I don't have a religion. I just have an experience. That's all, just an experience. And I'm very grateful for that. So that was my mystical awakening. And I went ahead ultimately to write about it. And I have published about 10 books in all. And they're all written after the age of 70. And I'm proudest of that, I think, of anything in my life. That a lot of people reach the age of 70 or 60 or whatever and say, well, I'm through. I did it, I did my work. Now I don't do anything else except the rocking chair or the TV or whatever. But that was just the beginning for me. And so I have published all those books, and they all were written after the age of 70. And if you're wondering, I was 94 last go-round, last so this is sort of dedicated to all of the elders or anybody who expects to be an elder. And if you're lucky, why, you'll get there. And then when you get there, you wonder, was this luck or not? Somebody says, old age comes and she brings all her friends. And that's the part they don't tell you about. So I've had friends have come. And so I thought it was very strange that the first part of my life, I thought to myself, I've had all these mental experiences, emotional experiences, but I had not had the physical challenges. And but then they all came at once, and then they came, and I have had a good deal of physical challenges in recent years. And I say, well, the first half of my life, I focused on the non-bodily experience. And now at this point, it's nothing but the body. And somebody said, you know, the book that they wrote was called What to Do With Your Time in Between Visits to the Doctor. And that's kind of what happens to you. But there are wonderful doctors and different people in Boulder. Boulder's the center for both the spiritual and the physical well-being. And it's full of interesting people. And I've had a lot of interesting experiences in Boulder, one of which was that I met a bikini in the grocery store, or at least she said she was, and she looked like it. And she was the consort of a spiritual teacher who was just passing through Boulder, and that was pretty exciting. So anyway, Boulder's the place to be. And I feel very grateful. I lived in Boulder in the 1960s, believe it or not. I came here my first college teaching job at CU, and it was all different. None of you were if you were into this kind of stuff, you didn't tell anybody. and there weren't these groups and get-togethers, and but it was wonderful just to be here and to go into the mountains and have picnics and drink too much wine and somehow get down from the mountains. I don't know how. There must have been somebody looking after us, that's for sure. But it was wonderful, and it was paradise. I'm here to affirm. Boulder was paradise. And Boulder's still paradise, but it's a different paradise now, very different. And so after all those years, I said I was going to really retire to Boulder. And it was 40 years. I was away for 40 years teaching. And I went first to Kansas to teach at Wichita State. And there I had the pleasure of helping to set up one of the very early women's studies programs in the country, when people still didn't know what that was and still said, well, what's women's studies? You know, and kind of looked away. And so that was Wichita. And then when I was 80, I decided that enough is enough. I've been teaching for 40 years and moved to San Francisco, and it was different. It was a lot different from Wichita and Boulder, but it was a good experience. But I then hit 80 and I said, well, if I'm gonna retire to Boulder, I think I should do it now. And I was right, because I don't think I could do it now. But I did do it. I came back to Boulder about 15 years ago. And although it's not the same place, but no place is the same place. Everything has changed, totally, totally, in this world, and not always for the better. But anyway, here I am at this advanced age, still writing and talking and teaching. And if you're once a teacher, always a teacher. You're always trying to illumine people. But sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. It doesn't at all. So anyway, that's my story in a nutshell. And we'll have a question period later.
Share a second time.
Do you want to share more later? You can.
I don't know what do you mean?
Okay.
Well, I will say, people often say, what happened to your relationship? And what happened was, we struggled along after that for many years. Her relationship didn't last very long, maybe 2 or 3 weeks, something like that. It was kind of brief but intense, I guess you would say. And so we were still related, we still were living together, but it was never the same. It just wasn't the same. I couldn't find it in my heart to forgive totally. I just couldn't. And we still enjoyed one another's company, but it was not the same, not the same. And finally we did split up, but that was years later. And I live alone now, and I love it. You know, there was a book that's called How to Live Alone and Like It. I don't like it or because I do like it. I love it. And I never wanted to get involved. I said, never again. I'm going to get involved in a way like that. I've had it. And so, but anyway, I live in Boulder. I love living in Boulder. And that's kind of where I am now. And now I'm on what I call the 2-year plan. You know, you've heard these countries have the 4-year plan and the 5-year plan and the 6-year. Well, I've got the 2-year plan. And somebody says, what do you do with the 2 years you're out and you're still here? And I say, well, I guess I'll have another 2 years. 2 more years plan. So who knows? My father died at 91. My mother died at 98. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. I don't know. Who knows?
Thank you, Dorothy.
Nobody knows.
Thank you for sharing your inspiring life and your experience. Thank you. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to share beside you as a friend.
Can I ask a favor? later on, I know there's many healers here. Could we take a moment to extend Dorothy's 2-year plan and offer healing for her when it's appropriate?
Thank you so much.
Well, we all have so many experiences to share, and as I was sitting with what's rising within me to share, I didn't want to get caught in giving the long trajectory. As we age, we continue to evolve and have more deepening and ever expansive experiences. And so just the lead-in for the 2 experiences I want to share. My own ecstatic and unitive experiences started to my mind, to my recollection, to my memories when I was about 5 or 6. And I loved that Dorothy was segueing from her share with that poem about seeking, because the phrase that is most operative for me has been being sought, finding myself being pursued by the beloved, finding myself in any form of life circumstance and veils being pulled back and time stopping and an inner penetration of the beloved arising with that fullness of its consolation. And when I reflect on the phrase of the divine desiring that I believe is happening at our very core, there's that paradox of the seeking and being sought in its play, in its divine play. And I had begun to start to play really actively and pretty audaciously. I didn't have limits on how I thought I needed to approach my beloved very often. In fact, even in junior high school, I had sprained my arm, and at that time my room would light up with blue and white light a lot, and I had sprained my arm, and in my vanity, I didn't want to go to school in a sling. School was starting the next week, and so I challenged the beloved to heal my arm, and woke up with it healed the next day. So I was always like pulling on the beloved, do this for me, do that for me. And in that kiss, finding myself exalted over and over again to experience in that divine action or in the words that would arise or come to me, the submission of the beloved to those natural human desires of my own, and the humbling, the utter undoing that happens in that experience of being loved that much, that even the smallest step that seems irrelevant is actually the small step that matters the most. And further on, the first experience I wanted to share was, it started happening in my late teens. So after a lot of this divine play, I found myself waking up with this pursuit. It was like a lover coming, it wasn't like a lover, it was the lover coming into my room, waking me up into the mornings and moving from the spaciousness of what the room might be contained upon me and within me, and moving into my body, penetrating, and finding myself completely exalted and climaxing in that state, and waking up into the mornings like this over and over and over again. And then there'd be a subsiding where I would do the normal things like get up, and I wasn't drinking coffee at the time, but maybe having some millet or something. And then finding at 11 this pursuit coming upon me again. And very often at this stage in my own relationship with the beloved, it happened with a sensory experience of this part of my head. I was very unaware of languaging around subtle energy, and I grew up traditional Catholic, and sacramental constructs were very powerful for me. But this part of my body I could physically feel the subtle aspect of a breaking open. But the breaking open was to a waterfall of presence. So the presence itself was like breaking it open. It wasn't me breaking open to receive. And yet the receiving happened as the breaking open. And at that time in my life, it was definitely mysterious, and I didn't have anyone to talk with about it, like most of us, right? But my body wasn't able to sustain it. So very often I could find myself to hold on to something and then just either swoon and stay in that state, usually for about 2 or 3 hours. And within then, what was so incredible was that there was the layered awareness that I was in a world that had form. So I would be aware of all of you, but all of you would just be simply lit up vertical columns of light. And then my greater presence would be in the realms that had less form, if you will. And the boundaries, there weren't anything like boundaries. There was natural order and natural harmony, but not boundary. And in those states, there was a freedom of visions and miracles and wordings and exchanges that were happening with such great delight. And that experience lasted going on in a daily fashion for about 4 years. And within that time, as I started to be able to be walking around with greater ease and having it happen simultaneously, I had the sweetness as well as to I was loving working with people that were coming to the end of their lives or in need of greater care. And they would be shape-shifting into mystics that I was close to, or the forms of the beloved. And so it was an awareness that Cynthia was standing here before me, and at the same time Cynthia was Mary Magdalene in full form that I could touch and kiss and hold. And so this multiple experience went on for quite a while. And in that, I found myself as well growing in wholeness, not moving away from being alive, but finding a place in being alive here, finding great reason and joy and purpose and meaning, if you will, in that elusive way. It's quite elusive to nail those things down in a way that was quite grounded and quite integrated over time. So that experience, after the 4 years, it continued up until about 2 months before joining a monastery, and then all sensory experiences completely disappeared. But there was such a clarity of the nature of my relationship with the beloved that it wasn't hinged in the sensory experience. It wasn't about the ecstatic experience. That was sweet and delightful, but the ecstatic experience was the touching of my finger to my nose, the walking through a door, the staying in the sense of darkness, the staying in the sense of bereftness, because the bereftness itself was contained within the wholeness of the beloved, not here, but just in the direct experience. And there came a time after about 6 months that in monastic life, I was kneeling there before the initiation of a pretty powerful ritual. And I don't want to get into the rituals and the names and the things, because I don't think they matter so much. It clearly mattered to me from the level of devotion and intention in the moment, but it was only the setup. It was only the opportunity. And I was kneeling there before we were beginning what was going to be a dramatic 3-day ritual. And as I was kneeling there, a quiet interpenetration happened, and the room all shifted into that interpenetration, and I became one with the spaciousness of that. And then a place coming from no place within, I heard the words of the beloved. The beloved said a phrase to me. And I don't remember the phrase because it didn't matter. But the sounding of the words set me into a place of ecstasy that lasted for the entirety of that ritual. I don't remember anything of the ritual, though I know I participated because I didn't find myself kneeling in the same place when that time of ecstasy ended. And the overflow of that was that our community was completely intoxicated. I mean, we were completely drunk in spirit, laughing ourselves all the way down the hall every day. And that was, we lived in silence, but laughing, you could laugh in spirit. And so within that, about 2 months later, and this leads to the second experience, and then I'll read a poem and we'll move to the next segment. Every morning we would prostrate on the cold concrete floor in a form of surrender into the day and surrender into Source and the beloved. And I was prostrate on the floor, and the sounding of a Hebrew psalm erupted within my body and my mind and my heart. And in the sounding of that psalm, I found myself exploded, or dissolved is probably a better word, dissolved into a silence that exists now. That silence became the one and only container, if you will, in which I began to walk and take my journey. And everything has been pulsing and such in that silence since then. Monastic, or what seems to be another form right here in this gathering. I have never been not in that ever-present silence since. So even amidst the cacophony of the world, or a really fun, crazy time of dance to 80s music, there is only the silence, and there is all, the allness in the silence, uninterrupted. So I'll bring my share to a close. There is an open cavern within, sitting still like the starry expanse, empty with a void, pregnant with an expectation, new life on its way. Stay empty, my companion. Stay pregnant, my friend. The labor pains are soon to start, unraveling all you thought you knew, desolating all you thought you had. But soon so soon. Your life will be laughing, sitting upon your lap. So we'd like to open it now to anyone that would like to share in the larger group anything that you'd like to share, a personal experience, a reflection that's come forward just from the catalyst of us being together, the alchemy of that, a direct question that arises within your being, because we know it's all of the beloved. And if that's short, great, then what we'll do is we can break into, there's quite a few of us here, let's break into like 3 groups. I invite you to share in that group some of your own experience. Let the light and the wisdom flow. So now I open it to the larger group, anything anyone would like to share. And if you'd like to use the microphone so it's easier, great, and if not, we may not need it. I just wanted it as a backup.
Don't all speak at once. If I could, I would like to add a little bit to my story before they get their act together here. What I talked about was the ecstasy. What I didn't talk about was the agony. And it was ecstasy and agony because my process went on for a long time. And what happened was that it was as though everything, that energy, that love, that joy, went through my body, and then it would hit a block. It literally was like it would hit a block somewhere. And I would think, oh dear, the fun is over. Now I'm going to suffer. But that would go on till I got that block cleared. What it does is it brings it to your attention, your weak spot, your needy spot, your pain spot. And then you pay attention to it and you do whatever you can to try to alleviate it. And finally it does lessen and go away. You think, well, that was pretty good, I'm okay now. But then the next spot blocks. You get another block in another place. And then you focus on that. And I finally did have one person I could talk to because she was having a similar experience. And we called it the ups and downs. Some days you're up and it's wonderful, and some days you're not up at all, you're down. And you've got a problem here and a problem there. And you think, I think, well, I got through that one, but I don't know about this one. I think this is the real thing. My heart is just failing. It's giving out, or my indigestion is not going to allow me to eat food anymore. But then you go through that, and then you come out from that, and you say, well, I got through that one. Anyway, I guess I'm okay now. And so it went on for years. But there were intermittent periods of joy and agony that I went through. But your body is literally being refashioned. Your body is literally being remade. And finally you get to the point where you're stable, and if you're lucky, and if you're lucky. And so that happened to me. Finally it all flattened out, and I don't have those ups and downs now. I just am pretty much like most people are at this time of life. But anyway, I just want to add that so you would know that my process wasn't all fun and games. And then between the fun and games, there would be periods of despair and problems, physical problems. But your body is literally being remade. And what you're left with is certainly heightened sensitivity to everything. And for me, at the beginning in particular, the world was so beautiful. Everything was beautiful. Every person was beautiful. And it was just a wonderful state of consciousness to be in. And it still comes back from time to time. I think I was always a mystic. As a child, I think I was a nature mystic, because I always felt an exaltation, a real exaltation, by going out into nature as a kid. And I thought everybody did. And I was shocked when I found out some people didn't have that feeling at all. I had one friend who said, no, I didn't have that. I'd rather read a book, or I don't want to be outside of concrete. That's what they said. I never want to be outside of concrete. So, people have different reactions to the world. But anyway, that's what I wanted to add.
Thank you.
But why don't some of the mystics, are you still too shy to talk about? Your experiences are so precious and so deep and so sacred that at first you think you just cannot talk about them. They're too sacred even to talk about. But ultimately, you gotta get over that. I did have one or two experiences I want to mention because it was so interesting. I finally thought I had somebody to tell, and this was an energy teacher who came, and he was at noon. He would teach us how to walk, and think about what we're doing and so forth. And I thought he'll understand. So I told him, now this was several years into my experience, I'll tell him what has happened to me. And I told him, and you know what he said? He said, if you're lucky, you'll get over this ecstasy. If you're lucky, you'll get over it. Yeah? Who wants to get over ecstasy? So, and then later, there was here in San Francisco, a wonderful Qigong teacher. And she was married to a master from China, and he could stand on eggs that weren't cooked and not break the shell and do all that. And I told her, and you know what she said? She said, no, the literature doesn't mention anything you're describing. Your energy can be hot or cold, but nothing that you're talking about. So, I'm not in the literature. Shoot. So I didn't have any luck when I tried to tell somebody, most people, so I just quit trying for all those years. But now, as we were saying earlier, Kundalini, which was virtually unknown in 1981, including me, I didn't know anything about it, now is a buzzword. Seems like it's everywhere. There's all this Kundalini yoga studios, but is this really Kundalini yoga? What are people really experiencing? I think they have wonderful experiences, which are wonderful preparations for the real thing. But when the real thing hits, you'll know it's Kundalini. That's the real Kundalini. When you can't talk straight or think straight, and your world is upside down, you know that's the real thing. So that's what I want to add.
Thank you.
Well, let's go ahead and break into groups. I'd love to encourage you to define your way, unless you need me to provide some guidance in that. How about if everybody choose, let's get into groups of about 6, and just choose. Be with somebody you feel drawn to, maybe somebody you haven't met, maybe someone you've wanted to connect with, a good friend on these levels, and perhaps taking chairs and clustering one out on the balcony here, and then maybe back in this area, and then one staying in this area. And Dorothy can stay here, and I'll join in with one of the other groups so we can all be together. So again, one out there, so you can go to the spot if you're drawn to a spot versus a person. Out on the balcony, take a chair with you, back in this area, back that direction, and right here. And okay, so let's go ahead and give a half an hour for sharing, a half an hour. So it's 30 minutes, it's 11:21. Let's come back here at 10 minutes before noon. Yeah, one group over here. So, everyone's separating into groups, and one group is going to stay here. And then I'm going to go join another group somewhere.
Yeah.
And we'll share from it. And then we'll all Whoever's still other guys, so Dorothy here as well.
Chair for you? You got one?
Shelley.
Yes.
Sure, I'll think about that.
Cool.
Not particularly,
experience where I just like started getting really busy pain and like just getting stuck in my spine, so like I had to like breathe through and work through that as it was happening. So just getting like whole EFT visuals like the whole time was also like moving through like lots of emotion and waves. Ecstasy at the same time.
Well, if you don't want to
Everything
talk
all at
about
once.
one of the questions.
Yeah, it actually like since then my spine has actually been like I feel like it was physically different and like there's a lot more energy that's being created and still integrating those pieces. So I haven't had to necessarily like last
We have an opportunity.
like that day I was very like liminal for like the rest of the day.
Not like a long extended, but there has
That
been
like awareness, like it's interesting like it's like cosmic energy but
because
also
I'll just tell them what's happening to me, and I assume that they know whether that's happening to them too, and then it's not, and eventually I hear
that
back.
experience of
Very
like actually like learning about people's bodies and
talking to her, or,
and this
you know,
place
those
is
kind of
really
things were
important, not just
surprised.
like
So,
your body or like
I don't know, it just seems to always have been scattered in my life. The mind is one, and it's often when it's happening, but when the rest of things close down a little bit, like taking care of my children or my work or whatever, that's when the opportunity seems to like happen to those mystical, magical, they call them more like moments or hours or days or weeks, whatever that vacation is, but it doesn't have this constant, it just dip in and out. And some of it is like really sad 80s music where we're all just ecstatic. connected in some level.
And I know it was real. 3 years ago.
Lori talks
It
to
started
cows.
off like sensation.
And she's in a group where everybody will accept that.